and it's just changed me. That's the thing. I mean, I love all the subjects that I have taught, and they have all changed me to some degree. But TOK, I think, has done more than anything else to open my eyes and change the way I look at the world. And that in itself has become the driving aim for me with TOK and as an educator. I basically just figured out that that is what I'm trying to do with my students. I'm just trying to open their eyes. I'm just trying to make them be able to rethink the world.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to IB Matters. And I'm here with a special guest, as they all are. But this guest, I think, might be pretty well known in the IB world. His name is Michael Dunn, and he is the founder and purveyor, shall we say, of theoryofknowledge.net. And I had the great opportunity to meet Michael in person at the Global Conference in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago. And I talked to him about coming on the podcast and kind of sharing what he does. And welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Thank you very much, John. It's great to be doing my first podcast with you.
Okay, that's great. And so let's just kind of start at the beginning, as I do with most guests. Just talk a little bit about your educational background, your journey, shall we say. And I know you just moved to a new school, so maybe you don't know that much about it, but we'll hear a little bit about where you're at, and then we'll get into the theory of knowledge portion.
Sure, yeah. So I come from a town called Cambridge, which may be familiar with some people out there. It does
Hmm.
have certain connections when it comes to the educational world.
Yeah.
I went to school there and keep going back and forth to Cambridge. South America, Cambridge is kind of my yo-yo route. I studied at Edinburgh University in Scotland. I did a PGCE in Exeter. And from then, always wanted to go abroad. Worked first in schools in London and then headed out to Colombia, which people told me was a very bad idea. And the more they said that, the more I wanted to experience it for
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
And ended up in the very wonderful Bogota, where I taught IB for the first time. And it was a big kind of wake up for
Okay.
me in terms of education.
Was that your first experience with IB then?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. I wasn't familiar with it beforehand. I was very much a sort of UK sort of ensconced
A
educator.
levels and all that kind of thing.
Exactly. A levels, GCSEs. Okay in their own way, but as soon as I went into the IB world, things started to make a lot more sense, and I realized the potential of international education.
Yeah. So how long did you say you were in Colombia?
I did two stints. As I say, I yo-yo.
Okay.
My first stint was 2.5 years in Colombia. And from there I went to Lima, where I worked in a wonderful school called San Silvestre. And again, yo-yoed back and forth between there and the UK. Also worked in Markham in Lima. And finally Newton College, which was my favorite experience in Lima. Really, really progressive school that was changing from GCSEs to NYP. Just an absolutely fantastic place to be. And I've been very lucky with my schools because TOK has always had a central role. I've been really lucky with the SMT that have always wanted to drive the school with critical thinking and theory of
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah.
I consider myself fortunate.
Yeah. So did you jump? Is that kind of how you were introduced to theory of knowledge, TOK,
Yeah.
because you were just hired basically, or you got the job to teach TOK?
Yeah, no, well, I got the job to teach history, and as so many TOK educators sort of enter it, I was dropped into it, come and teach history and do a bit of theory of knowledge as well. And I didn't know what to make of it. In my first school in Colombia, the TOK teacher said that it was a win for him if not everyone was asleep by the end of the lesson. And
Yeah.
so I didn't know much about TOK, but I didn't have a great kind of impression of what it was
Yeah.
and what went on behind those mysterious walls that were the TOK classroom. And as soon as I started teaching it for myself, I realized this is amazing. This is
Yeah.
brilliant. We are all TOK teachers, especially us history teachers. And I wanted to open it up. I wanted everyone to get involved. And that really has been my sort of journey with TOK, making
Yeah.
sure as many people as possible can draw on it, because it's just such a wonderful course. It's so
Yeah.
much fun. It's just the best place to be in the IB world, I think. And as a student, I would have absolutely loved to have had TOK. I'm
Yeah.
always thinking that. I really think other programs need it.
Yeah, I had a similar feeling. I was a science teacher by trade, and I was the coordinator, and I just kind of took the job as I signed myself the job as TOK teacher because it seemed fascinating, but I didn't know what it was exactly. And I remember my first training and them saying, don't use a textbook.
Yep.
Make sure you've got, because there are textbooks out there, and not to
Yep.
say that they can't be a tool that's somewhere on the side, but use the textbook as a kind of a model for, oh, this is what they're doing. They're looking at these kinds of ways of understanding what knowledge is. And so anyway, those that are listening now to us that are familiar with TOK kind of know what you're talking about, I'm sure,
Yep.
because we've had a similar journey.
Yeah, I mean, it is
Yeah.
one of my bugbears, I have to say, because, I think we should be after TOK specialists in schools. We should be looking for people who are devoted to TOK and wanting to put it at the heart of the DP. But it is too often, maths teacher in brackets could also
Hmm.
teach TOK, and
Yeah.
I'd love to see more focus on it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's, as a coordinator, that was always one of the things that it was important that we. I had monthly meetings with the IB teachers, and we would always have a segment of the meeting about what's your TOK, where are you infusing TOK in your
Yeah.
subject area to make sure everyone at least had it on their radar. If they weren't doing it well, at least they were aware of it, and I'm trying to always encourage them and give them ideas for where to go. And that led us. I've been out of teaching, directly. I've been working in this position with Minnesota's IB schools for 10 years. But
Yeah.
prior to that, I spent about 8 years as a TOK teacher. And I think, did you come on? Tell us a little bit about theoryofknowledge.net that you host and organize. When did that first start, and kind of how did you get that going?
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's sort of I've ridden a wave with it. I've absolutely not sort of intentionally created it. I mean, when I was teaching at a school in England in a very small town called Newmarket, famous for horse racing.
Hmm.
Um, in a very challenging school, and I was really struggling there. But I was watching this amazing teacher. Who was putting all her stuff online, right? So this was the early days, really, of
Yeah.
of the internet, and it just impressed me that she had her stuff online, and the kids were not impressed by much, but they were impressed by that, and it
So,
was
so for
wonderful.
reference, how many years ago was that? Was that
Yeah, okay, so
2030?
this is the early 2000s,
Okay.
2003,
Yep.
2004, something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
So I did the same when I then moved to Lima and started teaching TOK. I thought, well, I'll do the same. And I created this very, very rudimentary website. I managed to get theoryofknowledge.net. I just chucked all my stuff on it. And that was it. There wasn't much else out there at that
Hmm.
point. I just kind of left it. And then I discovered that, it wasn't even me that discovered it. Someone said, "Hey, have you checked your site out recently?" When I put in TOK or Theory of Knowledge or the Theory of Knowledge essay, you're coming up first. And I have since told marketing
Hmm.
people, digital people, that this happened, and they sort of have been very skeptical that can actually happen without throwing loads and loads
Yeah.
of money at it.
Without
But
paying for the boost,
exactly,
the
exactly.
extra $50 to boost
Without
it.
paying them specifically.
Yeah.
But that's how it happened. And I thought, well, I can actually do something with this. We are, we're topping the search engine chart, so let's try and do something. And
Hmm.
that's what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I mean, I discovered it in the probably around 2012. Would that be about right? You had that out
Yeah,
there at that
yeah,
time?
it was
Yeah.
it was going there.
Yep. And it was just kind of, for me, I looked at trying to, well, I was looking at what you had out there that was free. And I
Yeah.
think, when did you start offering a subscription?
Yeah, I guess 7 or 8 years ago, I suppose,
Okay.
something like that. I lose track. With every year we have trouble
Yeah.
with memory, right?
Yes. Pre-COVID,
Yeah,
post-COVID is
okay,
kind of
well,
the current
that's true.
inflection
That's
point.
true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's right. I say maybe even longer than that. But yeah, no, I did initially have things that you just purchased individually, but then I thought much better to sort of roll it all
Yeah.
together and just give access to everything that's on there. And I kind of hope that people discover things that they wouldn't necessarily discover otherwise. I want
Yeah.
this specifically to teach TOK. Well, actually, you're getting the whole thing, right? So maybe you're going to use that and that and that you wouldn't expect to use. And I I hope people are playing around with all the stuff on there. There's a lot there now.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into some of that as we go forward here. But I told you off air also that, my colleague who replaced me at my school when I retired, we had lunch the other day and just said that it's the best teacher support material, bar none. And he, whatever subject you're teaching, he happens to be a language or English teacher, but also teaches TOK, and he just loves it. So, but we'll get into that.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
so let's just talk about, TOK itself. You've kind of alluded to the fact that you were taken by this course, but
Yeah.
what is it about TOK that really
Mm.
helps? I mentioned that you shouldn't have a textbook when we talked
Yeah.
before, but what is it that helped you kind of what inspired you to develop this for teachers so that they could use it in real time?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose initially I'm just a very argumentative kind of person, and I found that TOK just structured my arguments and made it. I think my wife hates it, but it just allows you to articulate your ideas, allows you to draw on just a wonderful sort of vocabulary, lexicon of terms, and amazing key thinkers to sort of back
Hmm.
up what you say. And it's just changed me. That's the thing. I mean, I love all the subjects that I have taught, and they have all changed me to some degree. But TOK, I think, has done more than anything else to open my eyes and change the way I look at the world. And that in itself has become the driving aim for me with TOK and as an educator. I basically just figured out that that is what I'm trying to do with my students. I'm just trying to open their eyes. I'm just trying to make them be able to rethink the world and accept that they haven't got all the answers. They need to be able to augment their ideas about the world. They sometimes need to be able to replace their ideas about the world
Hmm.
because that's what's happened to me personally. I've had to completely reevaluate certain things that I thought I had right, and I think that's what we should be doing as
Hmm.
teachers,
Yeah.
both in terms of the knowledge we possess and the approach that we have to learning. And I mentioned working in Newton College in Lima. I had to do. I thought I was a good teacher when I went there, and when I
Hmm.
went there, I realized, wow, I really have a long way to go as a
Yeah.
teacher, and I had to kind of retrain and reapproach the way I walked into a classroom, and it was absolutely fantastic for me. So I think in every respect, that's what we should be doing, and that's what TOK has helped me to do.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from you is kind of this idea of having some intellectual humility. When we
Yes.
teach a subject, many times it's because we were good at it
Yep.
when we were students, and so as a science teacher myself, it's kind of like learning. Well, there's a narrative running through science, history of science in particular, that every inflection point happens with new technology. We now
Yeah.
can see deeper, further, tinier, broader, whatever it is, we can see more things. And so we go, oh, wait, what we thought before is wrong. So we've
Yeah.
had this kind of built in humility, but at the same time,
Yeah.
as a teacher, you're kind of going, I know the answers. And so you kids have to
Yeah.
know them on Friday, so
Yeah. Yeah.
that,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
that's what's really cool about TOK is that it
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
shows the students that we're not know-it-alls as their teachers,
Yeah.
but we are working with
Yes.
this. So yeah.
No, I think that's sometimes the problem with schools and the way in which we place a lot of value on tradition in education, and coming from arguably the most famous center of education in the world in Cambridge,
Hmm.
it's sometimes this massive weight around our neck there that we think we do it better than everyone else. I went to a school where teachers were chosen because they went to Oxbridge, they had PhDs, they were absolutely certain about what they were teaching.
Yep.
And sometimes it infuriated me. I think the best teachers are often ones that don't know the most and are not the most certain about the world. I think we should have the capacity to say I got that completely wrong, and that student knows more than I do.
Hmm. Yeah, or just being on the same side of the table with the students and sharing the journey with them and letting them see that
Exactly.
you're doing that as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's great. So, tell me a little bit about how people are using it. You were telling me off air that you don't that necessarily have a whole lot of direct feedback from people, but what are some things that you've heard about how people are using this resource?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was a lovely piece of feedback. I love feedback like that. And I do get a lot of feedback from non-TOK teachers, which is what I'm really
Yeah.
after. mean, of course, I want to help TOK departments, and I want to help the grades in TOK and all that. But what I really want is for people that have never come to TOK before, to be able to deliver it in their history lesson or their biology lesson or their sports science lesson. And I hear that quite a lot, that my resources are allowing them to do that. They're meant to be kind of this painless way of bringing TOK into the classroom. I think that term TOK sometimes triggers non-TOK teachers. It's a scary word. It's this
Yeah.
weird philosophical, esoteric subject. And I maintain that it's the most practical of all the DP subjects. It is this brilliant and clear framework that we can use to understand the world and take ownership of these very challenging ideas that we see all around us. And I do get feedback from people saying that's what it helps us to do. I had the best piece of feedback I think I ever had was a school saying to me, "Thank you so much for these resources. We've just had some parents at an open day saying they'd had a conversation around their dinner table with their children about TOK, and they use your stuff." And I thought that's brilliant. If I can help parents talk to their children about TOK ideas, then I'm really taking it a long way. It's really
Hmm.
being used in the right kind of way. So that was a lovely piece of feedback.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you use, and I've kind of we talked before about the fact that I've used your resources in a different context, but um,
Yeah.
the what sources I'm using a lot of the same sources. So why don't you share with our listeners what are some of the sources that you essentially, you're curating kind of the world for people in many
Yeah.
ways,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
sources are important.
Yeah, I mean, as much as possible, I want to avoid textbooks, as you have said. I don't want to denigrate them either. I think there are a lot of excellent textbooks out there, but I prefer not to use them. I prefer my students to go straight to the source of ideas and knowledge, via, the direct speeches and talks of thinkers who we're interested in, via articles, via videos, via news stories about what's going on. I mean, there's always going to be some filter, but I want my
Yeah,
filter to be as kind of thinly veneered as possible.
yeah,
I use a lot of media sources. I try and make them as balanced as possible. I try and make them as mixed as possible from as many different sort of sources. So I'm just doing the latest newsletter actually right now, and it's a lot of great sources linked to all of the themes and areas of knowledge. And yeah, the way I'm seeing it now, I have all these kind of images in my head how TOK works. The triangle is the key thing right now for me. So, a lot of schools try to integrate TOK with the rest of the DP.
hmm
And they try and do it, how do we bring TOK into the biology classroom? How do we get biology into TOK? And they think of it in a sort of binary way. I much prefer to think of it in a triangular way, which means you have the real life situation, the event or the issue, as the means of bringing biology into the TOK classroom and
hmm
vice versa. So everything goes in that sort of triangular way. So that's what my newsletter does, which is what I create every month. It's 20 stories that help any teacher to draw on TOK and kickstart these great conversations that we can have about the world.
Yeah, and that's the key. Is most any teacher, again, listeners, and I have a question coming later about younger children and so on. But you don't have to even be an IB teacher. If you happen across this podcast and you're not in an IB school, what Michael does and the concepts that are within the IB's theory of knowledge course they're not. They're not trademarked. I mean, maybe they're trademarked, but they're not. They're not. In a situation where you can't use them. And so,
No,
um,
absolutely.
the
I mean,
the
if this is a good subject, if this is a meaningful learning experience, then it should be used by anyone.
right.
It should be capable of being in any classroom,
Yeah.
and I think it is that good.
Yeah.
And you use it with your seniors, and I
Yeah.
love hearing about that. I've got another chap in Brooklyn who uses it with 20 something adults,
Yeah.
uh, and I now all of my resources are now produced for non-IB learners. So,
Yeah.
I don't think it should just be for TOK. I don't think it should just be for the DP. It should be for anyone, and
Yeah.
that's the thinking.
Yeah, just the quick reference to the work I do with it is seniors. In this case, is senior citizens.
Yes.
I have a
Yes.
discussion group every Monday, and
Not just
my
teenagers.
quote unquote students. It's really a discussion group are
Mm.
between 75 and 90 years old, and so it's
Yeah.
based on the same ideas. So let's go back to what do you want to name any specific sources you use? Like I think you use the
Well,
conversation.
I can give you a few examples of what we're
Sure.
looking at this month. For example, we're starting with with a story from the Guardian newspaper, which is all about ayahuasca tourism. Which you know, being someone who's lived in Peru and Colombia, I've heard about a lot of tourists coming in and doing the ayahuasca thing. They have almost in the same way that the UK has its own version of Indian cuisine. They've created their own sort of structured belief system,
Hmm.
which is completely removed from the indigenous, belief system regarding ayahuasca, which they don't even call ayahuasca. And it's sort of removed it. It's also having a massive impact on the environment. So it's a great discussion about the way in which cultural appropriation can have these consequences. I'm looking at the story about Sydney Sweeney and her
Yeah.
genes. I don't know
Yeah.
whether you've seen that
Oh,
advert
for
for
sure. Yeah, that was a discussion in my
wow.
senior group yesterday.
Yeah, it's a great
Yeah,
discussion.
yeah.
I'm using Forbes for that story. Another story we're looking at is from Wired magazine, which is all about the rise of Dr. ChatGPT, the pros and cons of using AI
Hmm.
for medical diagnoses and treatment. So these are a few examples of the kind of thing that we'll
Sure.
be looking at this month.
Yeah, that's good. So then, if you're, you were at one time a beginning TOK teacher. If you're that person that just walked in and said you're teaching Spanish and you're teaching TOK, how would you get them started?
Well, I've actually just produced a sort of 12 point sort of guide, little videos for teachers who are just starting TOK. And I think number one is don't be scared.
Hmm.
This course can become whatever you want it to be. I think we can place much too much importance on the essay and the exhibition. I think when we come to it, if you created this enjoyable, enriching, meaningful course, the students will naturally find a way to create a great TOK essay and great exhibition. And there's no exam at the end of it, so you don't
Right.
have to worry that you've maybe missed out this part of the course and this part isn't we haven't done that in enough depth. So don't be scared. This is going to be fun. This is going to be great. That's the first thing that I would say. And actually, there's another piece of advice rolled into that, which is, don't pay too much attention to the assessments. I've seen teachers that do loads and loads of practice essays and practice exhibitions. I think only one or two of those are necessary really to prepare students properly for the two assessment tasks. You're going to spend a long time when it comes to it in the three interactions with your students, helping them to craft their own kind of
Hmm.
personalized essay. The exhibition is something you can chat to them a lot about. You can give them a lot of help without overstepping the mark. So yeah, those things will happen naturally.
Hmm.
They'll just find their own way when it comes to those things. So don't be
Yeah.
overawed by those things. I also think you should be making sure that you are not isolated when it comes to TOK. You should be getting help from as many of the subject teachers as possible, bringing people into your lessons, opening your doors, making this a public thing. I'm a very visual teacher, so I encourage my students to create loads of displays, which I sort of I'm almost a colonialist when it comes to TOK. I want it spread throughout the school. I want it
Okay.
taking over all the walls, and
Sure.
I want it visible. I want people to
Yeah.
know what we're doing. So I don't know, a few ideas there.
That's good. I think one of the challenges for anyone teaching TOK is it's often kind of shoehorned into the schedule. And so sometimes you'll hear, because of the
Yeah,
relatively low minimum hours, students will have it for one semester or a year or one trimester a year, and they're
yeah,
separated. They see the kids, and then 8 months later they see them again, and
sure.
very few, I think, have it every day. So
Yeah,
it can be a little challenging in that respect. I can see
yeah,
where some teachers are feeling the pressure to do the assessments because they have 100 hours with the kids or something like that. So,
yeah. Yeah,
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 but
yeah.
that's good advice. Thank you. And then let's get to the subject area teachers. When I was a IB diploma program coordinator, I had monthly meetings, but
Yeah.
and I tried to bring in those subject teachers. What do you suggest for making sure that they are aware of how they should be and can be, and really philosophically ought to be including TOK concepts in their everyday subject focused lessons?
I try to focus more on the aim of TOK than TOK itself. As I've said, I think, when you start saying TOK and theory of knowledge,
Yeah.
you trigger some people. And they start assuming they have to do certain things which they really don't have to do. So I focus on what I see as the key aim of TOK, which I've kind of alluded to, which is
Hmm.
challenging assumptions. I call it authentic critical thinking, which is about helping students to be able to identify and challenge their biases about the world rather than confirming their biases. I think TOK is the opposite of confirmation bias. So as soon as you start being completely clear about what the aim of the course is, you will find that other teachers will suddenly realize, well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to avoid them basing their understanding on these misapprehensions and misconceptions about biology or history or geography or whatever it is. That's exactly what I'm doing. And it's such a powerful pedagogical tool,
Hmm.
identifying these assumptions, these biases, and then giving them the resources to challenge them.
Hmm.
And this is what we do, I think, as educators. We are trying to inculcate humility, and make our students more receptive to different ideas, ideas
Hmm.
that are outside their own experiences.
So while you're talking, it made me think of a question that is not on our list. Warning. uh, let's talk a little bit about this IB is in 160 countries, something like
Yeah,
that, in all kinds of different contexts, and religion has kind of had an interesting relationship in TOK.
yeah,
And when you just talked about challenging assumptions and what you think
yeah.
how do you see that discussion, which can be kind of prickly in some places for sure?
I'm quite honest about my own sort of belief system, which is I don't have a religious faith, but at the same time I am fascinated by religious faith. And I watched a brilliant TED talk by a person called Leslie Hazelton, who writes a lot about religion, and she describes herself as an agnostic Jewish person who writes about Islam, which I think is fantastic in itself.
Okay.
And she is one of the examples of how I've completely changed as a result of TOK. She talks a lot about Muhammad and his time in the desert, and the fact that his awakening, if you want to call it that, was all plagued by doubt. And she then talks about how doubt is inbuilt in faith. And it's just a brilliant insight. She talks so sensitively about religious faith. She has the utmost respect for anyone with religious faith, as do
Hmm.
I. And it's just it really awakened in me an idea that religion was something completely other than what I thought it was. It's not just about fanaticism and certainty. It's about overcoming your own doubts
Hmm.
about the world. So I try and model myself in the TOK classroom. I try and sort of reveal aspects about myself without overstepping too many marks, but just sort of saying how open I am to different approaches about the world. I'm hugely, the courses that I deliver have a lot of indigenous knowledge built into them as well,
Yeah.
which is a completely different framework for seeing the world. So my students, I think, understand that that there are these multiple routes towards knowledge.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're bogus. There are
Yeah.
plenty of conspiracy theories out there that are completely unfounded. But at the same time, there are often completely different routes that are totally legitimate, and come from a completely different place. And I think that helps to create this safe space that TOK should always be.
Yeah.
Everyone should feel completely comfortable about sharing their ideas, no matter religious, philosophical, cultural, or linguistic backgrounds are, and that's what I try to do in TOK.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for answering that because it's one of those things. And as I've watched the evolution of the TOK framework and the way in which that they ask us to kind of deliver it through different lenses, religious knowledge, indigenous knowledge
Yep.
have been terms that have been used. Well, good. So now, one more thing I wanted to ask about on the teacher's side or incorporating things. Now, all of us, in fact, we were just at the IB Global Conference, and no matter what the title of the session was, everyone talked about AI.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's having an effect and influencing whether it's directly articles about it or,
Yeah.
but now as we move forward with assessments and just thinking about things and how students look at the ethical use of it,
Yeah.
talk about that for a minute or two, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, first of all, I see it as a brilliant topic for discussion in itself.
Hmm.
That's my kind of first takeaway. And again, I look at the sort of newsletter that I'm putting together this month, and we've got loads and loads of stuff about AI generated supermodels. For example, I think Guess have just used their first ever AI generated supermodel in Vogue magazine, which
Okay.
is maybe perpetuating these completely unrealistic sort of beauty images.
Yeah.
So that's a great sort of topic for discussion. We're also looking at the way in which AI, if I mentioned Dr. Chat GPT, how is it affecting the way we seek out medical knowledge? It's completely shaking up the world of psychiatry and therapy. And there's also a great story about a chap in I think Ohio who has decided that his relationship with ChatGPT amounts to a kind of religious awakening, and his phone is actually a prophet rather than just an
Mm.
AI tool created
Okay.
by OpenAI. So it is an amazing topic to talk about. I think the TOK classroom is a brilliant place to have those conversations about how it's impacting the way we relate to the world and gather knowledge about the world. And then we've got the other layer of AI, which is the way in which it's affecting our learning. And in TOK, that comes down to the fact that you can use AI to create a TOK essay in about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So where does that kind of leave us? I mean, there are no simple answers to that. I hope that I manage to establish a relationship with my students which would mean that they would not feel the need to do that, or they would feel that it had somehow diminished um, their 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 whole performance when it comes to TOK.
Hmm.
If we are doing TOK properly, if we are genuinely going on a journey together, which I really think we do in TOK, I hope that they would take the time to write their own essay, and I trust my students a
Hmm.
great deal. I think it's a long game when it comes
Yeah.
to this. I think you start from the beginning of your course using AI a lot. I really think it's a fantastic tool that does a lot of the heavy lifting of learning. It allows us to cover a lot more ground a lot more quickly. So I definitely encourage them to use it. But when it comes to the essay, I want to have a conversation with them in those three interactions where they can talk about the trouble they're having writing their essay, the challenges they're finding, putting themselves into their essay, which obviously ChatGPT can't do for them, making sure it's a second order. The knowledge that they discuss is done in a second order kind of way, which again ChatGPT isn't great at. We also look at the limitations of ChatGPT. I use it a lot and it makes a lot of mistakes.
Hmm.
It's obviously based on what there is on the internet, and huge amounts of stuff on the internet are either not accurate or out of date.
Yeah.
ChatGPT still seems to think that the ways of knowing are part of the TOK course, which can land you into a lot of trouble. It still has trouble distinguishing between the themes and the areas of knowledge. So it often refers to, say, knowledge and the arts. And, so if you do rely on it too much, you will run into trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, there's got to be trust there, and you've got to, I hope, take them to the point where they're very proud of what they've done in TOK, and they do want to use this essay as a way of showcasing their knowledge and their
Yeah.
skills.
Yeah.
So I hope that's what they feel.
Yeah. I was just listening to the latest episode of IB Voices, which is a
Yeah,
podcast that IB puts out on this subject. And I thought, kind of the theme running through when they got to the meat of the matter towards the end, the theme running through is, when you assign an assessment, make sure it's clear what you want to know about the student. You're not,
right.
you want to know what about the student so that their work, while it might have some chat GPT or AI component in their work, we're still learning about them, not, that they can produce an essay in 2 minutes. It's,
Yeah,
tell us about yourself. So you're really
yeah.
sharing that. And that chat GPT can't do that.
Yeah, no. Otherwise, what's the point? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like the sort of debate over AI generated art. Well, what's the point of that? Art is the point of art is a human expression of our relationship to the outside world. That's what art is. If it's not that, then it's not art. There's no point having it. So,
Yeah.
I hope that's what they feel about TOK. This is me. This course is my framework for discussing my thoughts about the world. And if they haven't produced something like that when it
Yeah.
comes to their TOK essay, then what's the point?
Yeah.
And I hope they get that.
Hmm.
You're never gonna, completely solve this problem. And I think we do need a different form of assessment, which, we will have in a few
It'll be
years' time.
coming. Yeah. 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 So then let me just let's as we do with TOK, let's go from the specifics to the bigger picture. Helicopter back out. IB is a pre-K through 12 curriculum or framework of learning, and if you're working with PYP and MYP, obviously these kids they're just ripe for all kinds of influences. What can a early years teacher be doing that is TOK like, or is TOK?
Well, I think that central aim, which is, encouraging students to think about what their biases and assumptions are, and challenging them, learning the skills to be able to do that, learning to have the courage to be able to do that, can be applied at any age.
Hmm.
You ask the student at whatever age, well, why do you think that?
Yeah.
Where do you base that knowledge on? And you get them to think about where they built up their picture of the world, and you get them to think about whether that is a legitimate source of knowledge, and you hopefully then get them to either confirm it if this is a solid route that they've taken, or be prepared to alter or modify their view of the world. So you can do that with them if they're age 5 years old, or if they're 15, or if your guy's 85 years old.
Hmm.
This is an eternal sort of pedagogical aim.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in fact, one of the sources I used in the session yesterday was a short video about asking divergent questions, and the
Yeah,
idea that little children they ask the why question to the the great consternation of their parents. Why?
yeah,
But
absolutely.
questions that can't be answered, directly. I mean, that's the kind of thing that TOK does.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the perfect TOK students are sort of age 9 years old, the ones that have the courage to ask these questions that almost gets beaten out of you the older you get in school, and you're afraid to put your hand up and look silly in front of your peers. But the younger students, they're just the ultimate scientists and critical thinkers. So yeah,
Yeah.
the more we can encourage them to do that, the better.
Yeah. The question that I'm really interested in is from you, the answer to is, what do you think IB put TOK in here? What is that TOK experience going to leave us with when they've had that class and that chance to experience the aims of the TOK?
Well, I hope it is that idea of intellectual humility. That's the highfalutin kind of idea when it comes to the educational journey. But I think it has some just very practical applications. It is the glue that brings all of the different strands of the DP together. It is the means by which we can compare and contrast the different sort of styles and ideas that we have in all of our subjects. It is this kind of cognitive forum, if you like, this thing that everyone can share and use as a place of discussion. So yeah, I'm very ambitious for TOK. I have huge aims for it, and I think that was behind the development of TOK from the very beginning. They had
Yeah.
very, very progressive ideas about it from the start, and I
Right.
think it. it just shows how forward thinking they were when they put it in, because I really do think it's the glory of the DP. It's
Yeah.
just such a fantastic aspect. It's what every student should be doing.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, good. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for this time that
Pleasure.
you've shared with us today. I was telling friends I'm a little bit of a fanboy because I've been following kind of your progress and the work that you've been doing, and been able to utilize your tools, and I see them being used well in other places. And here in Minnesota, I know a lot of people are very grateful to you for the work
Thank you.
that you've been doing to share this with everybody. It's not, I'm sure, I can't imagine how much time you have to put into this, because I know for my little 1 hour discussion group a week, I put in about 5 to 10 hours. So it must take a long time for you
It is. It
to
is.
do all this. Yeah.
It's time consuming, but it's just I'm sort of obsessed by it, probably in
Yeah.
an unhealthy level. But
Oh, no.
I love it. It's
Yeah.
just fantastic.
Well, did you have any final thoughts before we sign off today?
Well, no, just an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And I go back to what you've been saying about using it with your adult education class, which I just love. I think that's fantastic, and I really hope that it is used as much as possible outside a DP environment. That makes me very happy.
Well, again, thank you very much, and I look forward to maybe talking to you again.
Absolutely. No,
All right.
whenever you want.
Thanks for listening. Please check out the podcast notes for links Michael has shared. You can link to the theoryofknowledge.net main page, the membership page, and the Matt Warren article Michael talked about in the podcast. I encourage you to check out the TOK.net main webpage. There you'll find you can subscribe to their free monthly newsletter and to follow the TOK.net social media outlets. I find lots of great information for free, and you can get a real taste of the resources before committing to the full access membership. We now have over 130 IB Matters episodes covering a wide range of subjects. To help you find topics of interest to you, use our podcast webpage linked in the notes. There's also a link in the notes to directly text us with comments, suggestions, or to let me know that you would like to appear on a future episode of IB Matters. Find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future programs. Join our over 4,000 followers on X at MattersIB. Also, help spread the word about IB by liking, sharing, and reviewing the IB Matters links in your own feeds and social networks. Now in our 7th year, we've been heard in almost 180 countries, a testament to the global reach of the IB.